This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. We've made it through 150 episodes of this show, which means either we're doing great work or those cameras haven't been on this whole time. Here's what we got for y'all. The US lists 71 foreign terror groups, but none of them are white supremacist groups. We'll tell you why some counterterrorism experts believe the US is falling behind in calling out white supremacist violence. Plus, we'll highlight the work of Chicago's first and only Black woman transplant surgeon and how she's fighting disease in her own community. But first, here's what you need to know right now. This could be the quickest presidential impeachment trial ever. With arguments now headed into Friday and the weekend, a final vote is expected over those next few days. In all, each side has 16 hours to make their case. The prosecution wrapped up Thursday with a focus on Trump's lack of remorse for his actions leading up to the Capitol attack.
He does not say the one sentence that would stop future political violence. The election was not stolen. He still hasn't said that sentence. That is why National Guard troops in full body armor still patrol outside.
The argument from House impeachment managers centers around three main steps which led to the single article of impeachment Trump is facing. The first,
he started planting the seeds to get some of his supporters ready by saying that he could only lose the election if it was stolen.
House impeachment managers argue once he did actually lose the election, he then turned to filing legal challenges. When those failed, he attempted to pressure Georgia election officials to find the votes he needed.
You can't let another person steal that election from you.
According to their arguments, Trump then saw one last opportunity to, quote, stop the steal by sending a crowd to the Capitol to stop the counting of Electoral College votes, set to certify President Joe Biden as the winner. Former President Trump's attorneys will begin their defense Friday. After that closes, senators will have up to 4 hours to question each side. It's still unclear if impeachment managers plan to call witnesses, but if they don't, closing arguments would come next. Today, the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, and that's where it's been since 2009. Meanwhile, the cost of living is up 20% nationwide since then. Of course, some states have already increased the minimum wage on their own, and others plan to, but across much of the country, it's still at the federal minimum. President Joe Biden, for one, does support a $15 an hour minimum wage. As he prepares to sign his first pandemic relief bill, he wants a minimum wage increase included and passed through budget reconciliation, basically by a vote on the budget that only requires a simple Senate majority. But there's a question around whether that move is okay by Senate rules.
I can tell you, as chairman of the Budget Committee, we have a room full of lawyers working as hard as we can to make the case to the parliamentarian that, in fact, raising the minimum wage will have significant budget implications and, in fact, should be consistent with reconciliation rules.
If the rules don't allow a minimum wage hike through that path, Democrats will have to choose between changing the rules or leaving it out of this relief bill. A report this week by the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office found a $15 minimum wage would bring almost 1 million people out of poverty in the next 4 years. Though the report also says the wage hike could push companies to cut more than 1 million low-paying jobs. The Center for Disease Control updated some of its guidelines around both vaccines and the virus this week. Here's what you should know. The CDC now says a second dose of a 2-shot COVID-19 vaccine can be scheduled up to 42 days after the first shot. This is for patients who missed their follow-up appointment or were unable to get one due to vaccine shortages. That's about twice as long as the gap the CDC first recommended. Now, typically, if you've been exposed to the virus, you should be self-isolating for a bit. We all know that, right? But experts say if you got fully vaccinated at least 2 weeks ago, you don't have to worry about that. Nice. And of course, double masking. If you're a loyal viewer, you already know we told you this weeks ago, but the CDC agrees layers are good.
Masks should have 2 or more layers, completely cover your nose and mouth, and fit snugly against your nose and the sides of your face.
White supremacist violence has become a global threat. Other countries and multinational organizations have called out that threat, but the US is falling behind in doing the same. Newsy's Mark Greenblatt has more.
In a major escalation in the war on extremism, Canada declared the Proud Boys a terror group this month. The terror designation means members can face prosecution and assets can be frozen in Canada.
It's no longer about speech, it's about violence, and it's about extremism, and it's about terror.
Last year, the United Nations cited growing concerns about the increasing transnational threat of extreme right-wing terrorism, noting a threefold spike in attacks in mostly Western nations. But the U.S. is falling behind its Western allies in the fight. Of the 71 groups on the State Department's list of foreign terrorist organizations, none have far-right or white supremacist leanings.
I think it's a problem.
Jason Blazakis is the former director of the State Department's Counterterrorism Finance Office, which has no domestic list of terror groups. That's to prevent wrongfully targeting political protesters here. But Blazakis says our homegrown violent hate groups are increasingly becoming global in operation, opening up new avenues to stop them. And in 2019, he suggested the U.S. sanction them.
We recommended a number of organizations that the State Department could consider and Treasury Department could consider for possible sanctions. And to this day, not one of these groups is on the State Department FTO list.
The UK and Canada have together designated 9 far-right or white supremacist groups as terror organizations, allowing them to freeze assets of those groups. In America, far-right extremist groups account for more than 3 times as many killings inside the U.S. compared to Islamist radicals since 2011. And those U.S. extremists are increasingly looking to get help from abroad.
It's almost like there are training camps off U.S. shores, overseas.
Yeah, white supremacist camp. And they even have a battlefield, too. It goes beyond simply having a camp.
And Blazakis says U.S. neo-Nazis from the Atomwaffen division travel to the Ukraine to learn from European white supremacists.
They come back and they've developed skills on the battlefield or at training camps, right? And those skills could be projected against American citizens like me or you.
The far-right Russian imperial movement has operated paramilitary-style training camps for extremists from around the world. American officials say Swedish men who attended one of their trainings went on to bomb a cafe and conduct other attacks. And the Russian group also connected with Matthew Heimbach, one of the main organizers of that hate-filled Unite the Right event in Charlottesville. Here, Heimbach poses in front of the White House with a member of the Russian imperial movement who flew in. They're holding up a Russian imperial flag.
This group has innocent blood on its hands.
Last April, the State Department, under then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, designated the group and 3 of its leaders terrorists, but stopped short of formally naming the Russian imperial movement a foreign terrorist organization, something that would allow U.S. prosecutors more leeway in charging Americans who work with them.
It's very easy to also sanction that group as a foreign terrorist organization. That would send a very important message.
The Biden administration has said it's looking closer, but has not acted yet.
We, of course, have a review underway, a domestic violent extremism, review that's underway by our national security team.
By and large, there are a lot of tools that they can leverage. That includes cooperation with counterparts and using the tools they already possess, plus shift some resources.
Mark Greenblatt, Newsy.
Pedro Pascal. If that doesn't get you to come back, I don't know what will. There was a time during this pandemic when the zombie apocalypse content hit a little too close to home, what with there usually being a contagion at the very beginning and all that. But for now, let's put the IRL world to the side and step into the world of tech and gaming with one of our favorite segments, Next Level Speedrun. Starting with this. HBO has tapped a couple of familiar faces to lead its planned TV adaptation of The Last of Us. The acclaimed 2013 video game focuses on the relationship between gruff old man Joel and snarky tween Ellie as they road trip across a zombie apocalypse. The game's iconic for a lot of reasons, including its powerful narrative that basically set a new standard for storytelling in gaming. And this week we learned Joel and Ellie will be portrayed on screen by Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey. Both actors also previously appeared in HBO's Game of Thrones series, where they played fan-favorite side characters who ultimately met with a grim, hard-to-watch fate. Of course, that describes about half the characters on Thrones, right? As the stars of this new show, things should go better for Pascal and Ramsey's characters, but if this series is anything like the game, everyone else around them better watch out. This week in Cruel Ironies, the developers of Cyberpunk 2077 are currently dealing with a major cyber attack themselves. Polish game studio CD Projekt Red says they've been hit with a ransomware attack. The stolen data apparently includes source code for Cyberpunk, as well as other popular games, The Witcher 3 and Gwent. If their ransom demands aren't met, hackers say they'll sell the code and publish sensitive corporate documents from CDPR. There's been at least one attempt to auction what's purportedly the stolen data to the tune of $1 million. The company says they're not giving in to the hackers' demands and have secured their IT networks from further intrusions. They also say no personal information from players or employees was accessed during the breach. Riot Games, makers of fine internet rage machines League of Legends and Valorant, are internally investigating their CEO following a gender discrimination lawsuit. Niccolo Laurent, who has run the company since 2017, is being sued by his former executive assistant, who claims he made advances toward her and then fired her for reporting him to HR. The company disputes the wrongful termination charge and says Laurent is cooperating with an investigation. Riot Games was founded in 2006 around the creation and development of multiplayer team-based game League of Legends. Its flagship product has been wildly successful for the company, bringing in $1.75 billion of revenue last year. But the company has a checkered past when it comes to gender discrimination. Riot settled a $10 million lawsuit in 2019 brought by a group of workers alleging harm from a sexist workplace culture. Chronic liver disease and cirrhosis are among the leading causes of death in Black Americans between 45 and 64 years old, according to the CDC. Newsy's Lindsay Thies introduces us to one doctor making a difference fighting that in her own community.
It's pretty common to be the only Black and female individual, and in surgery, oftentimes the only female. My name is Danae Simpson. I am a transplant surgeon at Northwestern Medicine. I do liver and kidney transplants.
One person alone can't tackle a behemoth problem like systemic racism in healthcare. But Dr. Danae Simpson is doing more than her part. She's the only female Black transplant surgeon in the state of Illinois. She's one of 16 in the country.
I think about it all the time. I think about it both from what I observe when I watch my patients try to navigate their, process their medical diagnoses. I think about it as I drive through the city and see the stark divide. The neighborhoods that are historically Black, lack so much in resources. And then I think about it from a personal perspective about how I navigated healthcare before I came into medicine and how my family continues to navigate healthcare.
If you were to look at health problems in the US, you're almost guaranteed to find Black people disproportionately face health inequity. Black patients suffer from kidney failure at 3 times the rate of whites. They make up 35% of all patients receiving dialysis for kidney failure, despite making up roughly 13% of the US population. The stats go on. Black men are 60% more likely to have liver cancer or inflammatory bowel disease than non-Hispanic white men. Black women are 40% more likely to die from it. In 2019, she founded the African American Transplant Access Program at Northwestern Memorial Hospital and Northwestern University. The goal of the program? Simple. Help this population get care that's equal to everyone else around them.
There are other reasons that are much more at play than genetics. And, that's things like living in a food desert, having to travel far outside your immediate area to find a specialist. Black patients are less likely to be referred to specialists when they need one.
To date, more than 50 patients have benefited from the African American Transplant Access Program. Patients like Glory Jackson, who says she was hesitant of transplant at first.
The program was very educational. I was happy to see that there were African American doctors, especially in this field, when so many outsiders really don't know about liver transplants in especially the African American community.
Over the summer, Shara Humphrey's mother needed a new kidney.
I donated a kidney to my mother July 6, 2020. The program was amazing. They still keep up with my mom. So, and it's just like, they just here for us.
We're finally starting to feel comfortable with having this conversation and starting to address, we shouldn't be colorblind. We shouldn't treat people differently, but we need to see the differences and understand the differences in complexion, the differences in opportunities and resources.
Dr. Simpson has advised other hospitals to create maternal or heart transplant programs specifically for Black patients. The work for health equity isn't just a calling for her. It's giving others the shot they deserve.
At risk of sounding cheesy, I'll quote one of my dad's favorite movies, "If you build it, they will come." And, I was afraid that, we would get everything in place and the program would just sit here. But people have been waiting for something like this. That wakes me up every day.
And for that, her patients are grateful.
It just gave me another chance at life.
For Newsy, I'm Lindsay Thies.
Immigration advocates are making sure that President Biden isn't writing checks that his administration can't cash. Last month, President Biden announced he'd phase out the use of for-profit prisons for federal inmates. Now advocates are urging him to do the same for detained immigrants. Newsy's Ben Shamiso explains.
Cuban immigrant Roger Ernesto Lau Munoz was detained for 8 months during the pandemic while his asylum case played out.
Éramos 36 hombres de diferentes países en un espacio muy reducido.
He spent most of his detention time at a private prison near Houston. There he says he couldn't socially distance, had limited access to soap and health care, and was harassed by guards for speaking out.
No teníamos con qué limpiar. No teníamos con qué fregar, no nos daban nada.
Lau Munoz was eventually released into the US after winning his case last summer. But around 14,000 immigrants remain in ICE custody, most of them held in privately run facilities where they await decisions on their immigration cases. President Biden has promised to end the private immigration jail system, arguing that no business should profit from the suffering of desperate people fleeing violence. But so far, he's been silent on the issue, disappointing advocates.
We don't need this bloated, mass incarceration system.
Up until the pandemic, the Trump administration enlarged the detention system at a record pace by detaining more immigrants without criminal convictions and by opening over 40 new facilities. But then COVID-19 forced ICE to dramatically step back. Advocates say this presents the perfect opportunity for President Biden.
It simply makes no sense that we detain people who pose no threat to public safety simply based on their immigration status.
John Sandweg served as an ICE director in the Obama administration. He says ending mandatory detention laws and using alternatives to detention should be as much, if not more, of a priority as ending contracts with private prisons.
You could deport just as many people. We could just do it a lot cheaper, a lot more humanely, and a lot more safely.
Ben Shamiso, Newsy.
If you haven't done so already, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter using the hashtag NewsyInTheLoop. Standard messaging rates apply, unless you say something nice. Social justice issues and the scope of the Black experience gets a lot of attention during this month, the shortest one of the year, so I am a little salty. But the Black experience isn't just about overcoming trauma. It could also be about projecting a vision of Blackness in the future that's intertwined with social justice and science fiction. National reporter Kai Beach introduces us to a group looking to inspire others through music that bridges the past and the future of the African diaspora.
We're trying to take people out on this journey that we're on and take them out, into a whole new world.
The artists behind this music say this is the future of funk.
They can try to take you down, but just remember they can't take your joy.
We're ready to help change the system.
A sound that moves the soul by combining science fiction with social justice.
When there's no justice, there's no peace, there's just gone away.
A few of the main things we want to do is to inspire and to heal.
Bring out the light that's inside of you.
The Grand Alliance is making music with a message through the genre of Afrofuturism.
It's a blend of something old and something new, and we definitely are here to just funk people up.
Kyla Marquis is the guardian of the group.
We got a lot of work to do, and we got a lot of love to spread.
Sorrells is known as the magician.
I feel like music is a medicine.
And Carl Carell, the captain leading this musical movement.
Positive energy in this, future funky world that we're trying to create.
While Afrofuturism has been around for decades, it normally receives most of its attention during Black History Month, a time frame the Grand Alliance says is not nearly enough.
The community around, that we're trying to foster is much more than just a month of time. It's light years outside of virtual Earth.
Music experts say Afrofuturism can help project a different future than what might be assumed from the past.
When you think about something like Barack Obama, there were people that dreamed about that well before it happened.
Dr. Eric Holt is a professor of music business at Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. He says this sound can have positive effects on the African American community and also have a global influence.
When I see young people taking on an Afro-futuristic standpoint musically, I get excited because it's typically positive and it's a self-articulation of their existence and the possibilities where they can go in the future.
And for the Grand Alliance, this sound is about breaking down barriers, but it's also about inspiring the next generation of artists.
For people that look like myself, peace and harmony is something that this world desperately needs.
And the Grand Alliance believes they can help others achieve that by respecting the pioneers of the past while also leading the future of funk.
I'm just encouraging the youth and the future of tomorrow to, take up space, be yourself, and be proud of who you are.
With photojournalist Luis Ramirez, I'm Kai Beach reporting.
That's it for us, gang. As always, thanks for watching. We'll be back next week for more In the Loop. Same time, same place. Top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.